Hello, everybody. Joseph P. Farrell, and it's news and views from the Nefarium on July 12th, 2012, in the year of the apocalypse. And I was going to comment on some goings on in Germany, and just as I was about ready to do that this morning, I got an email from somebody containing an article about those goings on in Germany. And I want to preface my remarks by pointing out again that I am not trying to cast any aspersions on the German people. In fact, I think it could be fairly said that the Germans themselves are probably some of the more, let's just say, devoutly anti-fascists for obvious reasons that one can readily appreciate. But this is not necessarily the case with the Merkel government, because there has now been an ongoing scandal in Germany that has forced the resignation of the head of Germany's BFV, which is kind of their, it's hard to describe, it wouldn't be exactly an equivalent to the FBI. It's actually the Office for the Protection of the German Constitution. And this article I will link on the website version of this news and views from the Nefarium, because it goes into the resignation of the chief of that agency. It's an internal domestic intelligence agency, sort of equivalent to the FBI, although there are other internal domestic intelligence functions fulfilled by the BKA, the Bundeskriminalamt, which is more or less their national police force. The BND, the Bundesnachrichtendienst, would be the German equivalent of our CIA. It handles external espionage and intelligence and security issues. But now, the interesting thing that has happened, there have been a series of murders in Germany of some Turkish shopkeepers that have now been traced very definitely to the activities of a neo-Nazi cell in that country. And it has forced the resignation of the head of the BFV, because on the day that the link was established, documents indicating the connection to the neo-Nazi underground in that country were shredded in the office of the BFV. Now, in the article, there is something I want to draw your attention to, because the article brings up once again what I've been talking about in a number of books and in some of these blogs, and that's the existence of what I call the Nazi International or the Fascist International. In other words, an underground group of a kind of an extraterritorial state continuing the ideology of the Nazi Party. In this article, it points out that the BFV has, since its founding by the Adenauer government, which was, of course, the first post-war West German government, was established by the Adenauer government precisely to oversee the German prosecution of Nazi war criminals. And one of its first chiefs was a fellow by the name of Dr. Otto John. All right, the last name is spelled John. It would be pronounced John in English, and in German, John. Now, Dr. John, in this article, it points out that he subsequently either fled or, as he maintained, was kidnapped by the KGB and taken to East Germany. What the article is not telling you, and what I want to get into now, is something that was uncovered by another researcher back in the 80s in a book that was entitled The Bormann Brotherhood. The researcher's name was William Stevenson, and it's not to be confused with the William Stevenson that was the head of British intelligence in North America during the Second World War. These are two different gentlemen entirely. The Stevenson that wrote the Bormann Brotherhood pointed out that from its inception, as does this article, the BFV was in fact staffed by, apparently, a group of survivors from World War II that were Nazis. And the Adenauer government, as is now well known, had a habit of putting these people into positions of power and influence within the German government when West Germany was granted its sovereignty by the three Western Allied occupying powers. Now, John was one of these very conscientious prosecutors, and he made it his cause, if you will, to try to track down the rumors of Bormann's survival in Latin America, and indeed tried to bring the full power of the German government to ascertain whether or not the rumors were in fact true. This is the beginning of the post-war Bormann saga, so to speak, in terms of any official prosecution by any of the governments of the West after the war. Now, as a result of John's inquiries, General Galen, who is also mentioned in this article, General Galen put out the meme that would become very popular amongst writers and researchers, that Bormann had been seen after the war in Soviet newsreels sitting in dignitary boxes with other high-ranking Soviet leaders. In other words, Galen was putting out what would become a research theme for some researchers, that Bormann was in fact the spy, the high-ranking spy that Soviet intelligence maintained throughout World War II in the very inner circle of Hitler's general staff and military command during the war. And this is true. The Soviets did have such an agent in Hitler's inner circle, and this agent was never found by German intelligence. After the war, it's interesting that Galen's organization is the organization putting out, or beginning to put out, this meme, and it was in response precisely to John's investigation of the Bormann matter, because John was turning up intelligence that suggested, number one, that Bormann had survived, and number two, that he had survived in a position of power and influence in this post-war international fascist structure or organization, whatever you want to call it. Now, I'm raising all of this to point out that something that I pointed out in the Nazi International, namely that all of this began to surface again after the German reunification during the Kohl government. There were German researchers, many of them connected to Der Spiegel, some of them independent journalists, researchers, and so on, in Germany, that were pointing out the connections between the Christian Democratic Union, the party, in other words, of Chancellor Kohl, the party of the current German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and incidentally, the party of the first West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer. All right? So in other words, the Christian Democratic Union has a long history of association with some of these post-war very right-wing groups, not only in West Germany, but during the unification, as we saw with Chancellor Kohl, with some of the neo-Nazi groups that suddenly sprouted up from nowhere, seemingly, in East Germany, in a supposedly communist state. All of this suggests to my mind that Merkel's government is now in a lot of trouble. She is losing Länder elections, or state elections, in Germany because of her pro-European austerity policies. All right, she wants to keep Germany in the EU by hook or by crook, and this is proving to be unpopular. She's losing elections. And in the midst of all of this now, on top of it all, many of the security chiefs of her intelligence agencies are under pressure to resign. In the case of Fromm, who was the head of the BFV, this gentleman has already resigned under the pressure of this neo-Nazi scandal. I think this is going to grow. And I think what we're going to see is, as the Germans themselves uncover more about this, we're going to see that perhaps this is a much deeper problem than any of us would like to admit. Anyway, this is a very strong, significant story, that there are now some internal pressures on the Merkel government And in my opinion, it's possible. I haven't really been able to do enough research to figure out if this opinion is plausible, but at least as a hypothetical possibility, I think it may be possible that this is somehow a deliberate attempt by some other forces that want to see Germany not pursue the EU policies that Merkel's government is pursuing. This may be some very, very clever manipulation of the German political landscape going on. It's a significant story. So I hope you'll watch it and stay tuned for further news and views from the Nefarium. Again, I want to thank everybody for your prayers during the transition. It was helpful, and we'll see everybody on the flip side. God bless.